The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host Keith Campagna.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show. And to Googlization Nation, we're starting to open up. I think all, either today or by the end of the week, all 50 states should in some form or fashion be resuming business. And as we've been talking about for the last few weeks, that's probably just the beginning of a new normal, or as McKinsey calls it, the next normal, because it's opening up a whole new challenge, problems. And one of those is going to be hiring people. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We've got a great guest, David Nason from HireBrain, who's been doing a ton of work using science and data. Novel idea when you're hiring people, using science and data. And he's got a couple good models behind it, including neuroscience. So we'll be chatting with him shortly. Some of the other things that have been popping up, I did a presentation yesterday, another virtual one for recruiting in the age of Googlization. Doing one tomorrow, really excited about. It's for actually a marketing company and a publishing company that I've worked with prior to this, and they work primarily in the staffing organization. So they asked me to talk about the new culture, or the reimagining culture in a post-pandemic world, which is the title of it. So I've been doing a lot of work on what that's going to look like, listening to a lot of thought leaders and people, and that's it. You know, it's going to be challenging. And you know, some of the things are the companies that are doing well in this environment seem to have a solid purpose. They know what they're about. They're communicating with their employees and their customers throughout on a regular basis. It really put transparency and authenticity and values in the forefront. But it's also created what I've been calling, especially with 36.5 million unemployed people, and it'll probably tick up a little bit for tomorrow. I think the numbers come out again, or on Friday. Is that there's recruitment and hiring is going to feel like shoveling out of a blizzard with a teaspoon. And the more people I talk to that are starting to reopen, starting to look at ways to bring their employees back, it's going to be a recruitment challenge and a talent acquisition challenge, but also a hiring challenge, because again, people are going to be a lot more selective. They're going to, just from a physical remote standpoint of how they're going to work. But if you're in the hospitality or retail business where you do need people on the forefront, and people are coming back, there are some people that are going to choose not to come back because it's not the right culture. They're going to have people that do want to come back, and maybe the employers don't want them to come back. Maybe that's not their top choice. So how you hire is going to be as important as how you recruit. How do you find the people, and then how do you determine that they're the right person? And it's a really expensive process. So David he and I were going back and forth yesterday through some emails, and he already feels like a kindred spirit, because we are. Hiring has just been pretty much of a guess. As a title I've put out there already, is that hiring is definitely not a no-brainer. So we'll be doing that. The other thing that came out yesterday, and I haven't had, or just Monday, I think, Keith, this was your old stomping grounds. Job Fight just came out with their Job Seeker Nation report. I guess That's their annual report. amazing amount of data. Again, it's got 32 pages, and like each one, I was like, wow, that's something. The one that stuck out, and I'm trying to look for it here, which falls in line with what I was just talking about, that 54% of workers apply for jobs even if they don't have all the skills that are required in the job description. More than half. I think that number is going to skyrocket in the next
oh my
couple
goodness.
weeks.
That's and then I mean, I don't know if we want the first rabbit hole we dive down to go towards the inefficiencies that recruiters have to deal with in order to find viable candidates, but going back to
that fits in line with what David's doing. I mean, obviously, if you don't know what you're looking for, then anybody fits. So it's like, how do you really define what we should be looking for, and then get the data and the science to back it up, rather than we're going to hire. He worked out, so he had a single personality trait, or he had a 5-year degree, or he went to this school. So let's hire everybody that fits into that category.
Yeah,
and that's never worked in the past. No sense is why it's going to work in the future.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's interesting to me, Ira, because when the last, let's call it like a market shift took place, and I don't think there's a market shift like this ever, but the one in 2008, I was so busy with, my kids were younger, like literally less than 2 years old. Both of them one was newborn, one was 2 years old. So I was kind of doing my thing at ADP, getting President's Club. So I was heads down. This is interesting to me because I feel like I get to experience just the pure observation of behavior within organizations like I could have only dreamed of. And so I'll be curious to find out what the geek and the geezer have to say today on the show.
Yeah, the higher brain and the higher authority, right?
Right.
Yeah, meet head to head. So yeah, it'll be fun. There's even what you just said, and again, maybe I've become a better listener. But as people were talking, it's like, wow, there's what you just said. There was a lot to unpack, because even now, I mean, you're a single father. You got kids at home. Everybody does, but everybody's wrestling with some people do have two dual wage earners at home, two professionals, two people earning. But there, caregiving, daycare. There's nobody for that. Elder care. Just doing the routine, trying to create that, as you say, the life-work integration. This is putting that to the test, for sure.
People are going to need training, right?
Well, absolutely. Well, that's the biggest thing is I just got off. I was just listening to a call. There was the CEO. It was a partner at McKinsey and a CEO of Catalyst. And they were both very, very successful women, and they were talking about the future of work and what this was going to look like. And as they said, one of the biggest problems with the remote from work, although they were indicating that between 50 and 70% of the people will continue to work from, whether it's work from home or work remotely, they're going to continue to do that. But it's how are companies going to help people establish boundaries? I mean, flexibility is one thing, but flexibility also means that you can work from 7 a.m. to midnight. And especially if it's not like they're working for 3 hours and then they're going out and playing golf or tennis or running or jogging, is that the other interruptions is they're taking care of their family.
Right.
And all those other balances. And right now, everybody's home. What happens when kids start having activities or if you take care of your parents, and now you have, so once people are out, it's going to make life, it's going to really put this to the test. So that'll be really challenging.
At the risk of being the guy who, co-hosts this podcast, I do want to mention to everybody that when I'm not being a single dad with 2 kids and not starting up the ROI shop, I also have my consulting concept of life work integration that I'll talk to people about all day long, because I mean, here we are. Like integration is the free flowing exchange of energy and ideas between what I call at least two systems. So, now you know the level of fascination I have with the way businesses are going to resurface. And all things considered, 60% of the people that are currently at home are going to stay here. This is macro. Like, this ties into so many different realities that we've been talking about that we were almost expecting to have happen over the last year and a half, right?
Yeah, but gradually. I mean, you were talking about, this was something that was going to happen in a gradual way, that life-work integration was going to become more important. And then all of a sudden, overnight, it became key. Yeah, so it'll be exciting. So we'll be talking a lot more about that. But in the meantime, it's a good setup to be able to bring on David, because all these factors are going to impact who's the right person to hire for the job. Because just because somebody has the right has X number of years of experience, or X number of the right degree, or they've had success in the past, does not mean in any way that they'll have success in the future. So, what are those skills? What are those behaviors? What are those values? What are those attitudes that people are going to have? And how do you measure them? So I'm really excited about this. So I'm really happy to welcome David Nason, from the CEO and co-founder of HireBrain, to the show. Thanks. Welcome, David.
Yeah, thanks, Ira. Thanks, Keith. I appreciate you guys having me on today.
So tell us a little bit about the background. How did you get to, where did HireBrain come from? What was the pathway to get there? And then we'll dig into the background, the science on that. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. So it's a long and storied story to what brought us to today. But this is a multi-year journey that started back in the mid 2000s when you're younger. I grew up originally in sales and then management in a services company before I became what was then known as a headhunter. And in the beginning, I assumed that hiring managers were good at hiring, that they knew what they needed, they knew what they wanted. They certainly told me that, right?
I was just going to say, I'm sure they told you that. Well, they're really good. They've been doing this for 20 years. Therefore, I'm good.
Yeah, I know it's really interesting, actually, and I hate to jump off this aside, but I can't help myself. So we survey everybody, and this research goes back. Really, the seed bed of this goes back to the mid 2000s, but we've been studying it intently over 7-8 years. One thing that's really interesting is that in our pre-education surveys, hiring managers both report a very high level of confidence in their ability to make great hiring decisions. Mm-hmm. And they also say that they need help. They feel like they don't know. So they both have a very high level of confidence, but they also report that they really don't know how to make hiring decisions. Interesting, right?
Yeah, a little bit of a paradox there, or hypocrisy.
Very much so.
One of the two.
Yeah. I mean, can you hold two things in your head at the same time? But I found out, relatively quickly that it's a challenge. It's a significant challenge, and I set out to solve for that. I honestly, there's a couple of audiences that I have and hold close to my heart. One of those is certainly recruiting. I grew up in that world. I still consider myself part of that tribe, if you will. But hiring managers also. I think that the line hiring manager job, the line manager job, is, if not the most challenging, one of the most challenging roles all around the world. They're getting it from all sides. And I set out to create something to help them, to help solve their problems, if that makes sense.
So rolling back the clock to like 20, as it sounds like you've been in the business about 20 years or so. How have things, or what were some of the things that you saw were missing from that hiring formula? Just because somebody says I need help, there's a lot of people offering help in improving hiring, including me. I mean, I've been in this space for 25 years, and we provide, primarily, I mean, the main part of the business is we provide pre-employment and leadership testing, and I use them as a guide, not as the magic bullet, because there's a lot of it's one piece of the puzzle, but. Before it was, if you can answer these 30 or 50 or 100 questions, this will give us an idea who you are. You've taken it to you're way beyond that. It's not even studying just the data, but now we're getting into the neuroscience of it. So let's talk about that transition. Let's talk about where, the state of hiring today versus 1996 when I started this business.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. So a couple of things. So one of them is, I grew up in a long line of scientists. My dad was a microbiology, anatomy, phys professor for 45 years. His grandfather was a fairly well-known chemist. Back at a time where, quite frankly, I don't really want to know what kind of chemistry he was doing in the early 1900s. But my brother's a PhD at Chicago in neurobiology. So I've always approached everything in a workplace environment using the scientific method. And so when I embarked upon this journey, my goal was to find out, very open-mindedly, to find out what are the keys to success in hiring? What does even success in hiring mean? For instance, it was a period of time for us to discover what exactly how we define that. And what we landed on was that success in hiring is both productivity over the long term, as well as both employee satisfaction. We say it's both productivity and satisfaction, but that satisfaction is both for the hiring manager and the new employee. So that's how we define success in hiring. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. It's an important three-legged stool, and I think so often it becomes, and I think the one piece of that was measured. Certainly it became hiring manager, but what their criteria was, and even to this day, when you ask a hiring manager what does success look like, they're pretty evasive. I mean, it's pretty vague, and it's tough to apply data to vague concepts. It's like, they're nice, they're a nice person. Or they seem to be busy, or they do a lot of work. What does that look like?
Absolutely, I can remember, back in the day, it was interesting. Both, at the beginning of a search, managers, leaders, and so on will tell you the things that they want in a hire. And then sometimes, and this happened on a fairly regular basis, you would find a person who could do the things that they were describing, right, in the way that they described them. And then at the end, there was this conversation, and those in recruiting completely can relate to this. They would all of a sudden pull back. Well, what's the issue? It's literally, they meet every requirement that you have. And then the person would say something to the effect of, well, I just don't know if I could have a beer with them. Have a beer with them. Like, what are you talking about? And so it was funny. Like I would never. Well, maybe that's why I've always worked for myself. Never got a job. I don't like beer, so I would never be. I would never be hired.
There you have it.
So my response in the moment was, well, let me ask you a question. If they have a $1.5 million quota and they deliver $3 million in revenue to you, do you think you might want to buy them a beer? And they're like, good point. I said, okay, let's go ahead. They made the hire and the person was successful. And I've used that, I don't even know, hundreds, and I've shared that with hundreds of people, over the course of time. Like, you don't want to have a beer. Well, let me tell you, if they deliver to you, right, would you not want to buy them a beer?
So, one of the things as you were going down that road, the other one that I come up with is when you look at most job descriptions or job postings, I won't say this is in the job description, but job postings, everybody's looking for that somebody who's highly motivated and takes initiative. And then 30 days or 60 or 90 days later, you talk to the person that you helped hire and they say, oh, they just didn't work out. Why? Well, they just couldn't follow directions. They would do things without asking us. that they didn't follow the rules. And I go, didn't you want somebody who was highly motivated and takes initiative and could is an independent thinker? That's who you wanted. That's who you interviewed for. And then the first thing is they don't fit in, they don't follow the rules, and they want to climb to the top right away. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. It's interesting, right? Yeah. I mean, people ask for things. Partially it's socialization, internally within organizations, and then externally what people read and see. And they read and see something that seems like, oh, that's a key to success. I'm just going to adopt those words. But what those words mean in a particular environment can be very, very different than another environment. And so it's the definition of what do those words mean in your environment? Like, what does it actually look like for somebody? How does someone in your world successfully behave, right, in a way that is taking initiative or whatever else? The words are that they use. Because as we know, it's not just the job, but it's also the environment, right? That's ultimately conducive to success. And in this program, and what we did over this period of time was we studied everything that had a positive corollary effect we studied everything that had a corollary effect post-hire. So we were interested in what are the things that have a positive corollary effect, right? In role, post-hire, over the long term, right? Versus everything else. And so those are the things that we advocate for. Some of them sound counterintuitive, right? They've heard people say, I mean, just an article, that came out in the New York Times last week by a very well-known, very well-respected MBA business consultant was talking about situational interviews, going through all this stuff about behavioral interviews are the best way. But you also, if you want to know what somebody will do in the future, you need to ask situational interviews. You need to ask people, well, what would you do if you were in this situation? It's one of the worst questions you could ever ask anybody because they don't know. They don't know. Whatever they say from there on out, they're making it up. And it's not their fault necessarily. And maybe they'll do it, but maybe they won't do it. It's just fantastic. But that's kind of conventional wisdom. If you want to know somebody, ask them, put them in a situational questions, and answers to those have zero positive corollary effect to success and role. And a significant portion of the time, over 60%, the answer to the question has a negative corollary to success in role. Fascinating, right?
What's always been interesting with that is, and certainly there's been the studies that have been done, a while ago on the reliability of different parts of the hiring process, and it is a cumulative effect. I mean, you don't want to just do an interview, you just don't want to test, you just don't want to look at a resume. It's each of those adds value to to your process, but the predictability of the interview, especially for most people. I mean, if you're an astute behavioral interviewer and have been trained, and you can read and you can also assess the body language and their tone, and you also can evaluate the quality of their response. At best, you're about 50. I think it's 54% accurate. Because it also depends on your mood of the day. It depends on the interviewee's mood and how their performance, and it also is the environment. Also, as you said earlier, impacts how the responses are done. And now that we're doing all these interviews over video, that changes the whole dynamic as well. And so the reliability and the consistency of the responses is crazy. But as you said, is just because they give you the right response, you ask a situational interview, how would you deal with this? And they respond, doesn't mean they're capable of delivering on that. It just means intellectually they know what to do, but it doesn't mean they have the ability to actually do it or to engage a team of people to help them.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting in an interview, that interview behavior is not work behavior, but yet people make hiring decisions based on interview behavior. Fascinating.
The
other thing that's
absolutely.
interesting,
and sometimes that's the only thing they use. It's like, oh, we don't believe in tests. Okay, so but it's been proven that the value of the interview is really questionable, and especially from hiring managers who most of them aren't really trained interviewers, and they don't learn this in a 4-hour course once in a lifetime.
It's so funny listening to you. It's hilarious listening to you guys from my perspective, because if it kind of feels like there's a punchline at the end of every sentence or idea that you share. It's like when you look at it a different way, you can't help but notice that the momentum of recruitment in general is almost in the wrong direction, or like there's just a huge miss with the way that people actually process the entire talent acquisition process. I never thought, listening to you guys.
It is.
It's hilarious.
It is a total miss. It's a whiff. I've put at this a lot of times is that hiring, basically hiring in using traditional methods is no better than flipping a coin. And people say, oh, we're better than that. We have an 80% hire rate. And then it goes back to what you were saying, David, is what was the criteria for that? Just because, they perform pretty well, they're average, but at least they stayed with us for 90 days. That was the hiring success. At least they didn't quit. They didn't go for lunch, and they actually came back. So therefore, hey, it's better that at least we have a warm body that showed up, and that's a good criteria.
And it's we're coming up on the break here, David, but when we come back, I want to pick your brain a little bit more, because as far as I could tell, everything about recruitment in the business world has just changed. And I want to get your thoughts on what, if any, like the outlook of talent acquisition leaders and sales leaders. Do they actually think they could keep doing things the same way that they were before the coronavirus hit?
I'm happy to. That'll be fun.
Yeah, and we definitely want to get back in, dig a little bit deeper into how you do it differently. What do you have? Because you do have a solution that's different than what we've been talking about. So you've been listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show. I'm here with Keith Campagna, my co-host, and our guest, David Nason from HireBrain. We've been talking about hiring. And up to this point, mostly why it's not working. And so hang in there. When you come back after the break, we're going to be talking about how we can make it better, how we can fix it, and what David's doing to do that. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to hear from our sponsors, Zor.ai and Success Performance Solutions. So stay right where you are. Hang in there. We'll be back in about 2 minutes. Hi everyone, this is Ira Wolf, author of Recruiting in the Age of Googleization. I'm excited to announce that my online course, Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter, is open for business. This course is the culmination of a 2-year-long project and releases recruiting tips I've learned after hundreds of hours of research, speaking with thousands of conference attendees, and interviews with dozens of experts. It's all available to you in Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter. To receive more information or get started, visit our website at www.successperformancesolutions.com and click on the tab, Recruitment Marketing for the Accidental Recruiter.
Imagine how your company would grow if your candidate experience earned a 99% approval rating. Well, to get to 99%, you need the 3 best letters in recruitment technology, XOR. Zor's text bots, chat bots, and audio bots increased IKEA's candidate conversion rate 455%. Zor decreases candidate drop-off rates, improves your candidate experience, and collects analytics for future strategies. To learn more, check out Zor.ai. That's XOR.ai.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show. I'm your host, Ira Wolf, with Keith Campagna, and our guest today is David Nason from HireBrain. Hey, when we left off, we were talking about, just wondering, in fact, during the break, we were wondering how anybody has ever succeeded, because hiring is really hiring methods up to this point were fairly unreliable for a lot of companies, and they've experienced that. But fortunately, data and science and analytics and just people in general wanting to be a lot smarter in the way they do things is changing. So I know, Keith, you had a couple. I think you had a couple questions you wanted to dive in with, but we want to get to the science between HireBrain as well.
Yeah, and I could probably combine the two things here because I'm listening to you guys talking, and I ran a staffing agency for, a year, long enough to know that there's theory and there's reality in what's going on out there. And it seems to me that any hope that the pre-COVID-19 recruitment process has been destroyed, has been obliterated. Obliterated. And it's like, the answer is in the data. I'm a software guy. We're all software guys. We know that. And here's David with HireBrain that basically says, don't trust your gut as much as you think you should. Let's really look at this through the eyes of data and through the eyes of science. So to me, that sounds like a massive opportunity for any recruitment organization or talent acquisition leader who's recognizing that now is the perfect time to think differently. So I'm curious, David, when you're out there talking to people, what are you seeing? Like, how are they responding to and the good news is I'm only asking you to go back 2 months or so, right? Like, how are people responding differently now that they're realizing that the system that they used to work in no longer exists?
Yeah, interesting, right? So, people are in three camps for the most part, right? People who are in some stage of denial, right? Either about what's going on or the fact that the world has changed, right? They just want things to go back to the way that they were, right? There's a camp of people who they're well aware that the world changed and then they don't know what to do about it. So they're kind of just sitting down, and then there are people who are progressive. They're taking stock. There are knowns, there are unknowns. There's a lot of unknowns, for sure, right, with what the future is going to look like. But there are some things that are that we now know will be different, right? You guys were talking about it earlier. There are a significant number of jobs are not going back to offices, and they're certainly not going back to offices in the short term. So if you want to be productive, if you want to be successful, if you want to get things done, you're going to have to both work remotely and you're going to have to hire remotely. And that involves some change. We've actually seen some significant positive outcomes here. I can tell you that all of the big search firms, executive search firms, have all now made their first entirely virtual executive hires. Fantastic. So 6 months ago, they never, ever, no one would have ever thought that was possible to do.
Right.
We're also hearing things like that hiring cycles and interview cycles are shorter than they used to be. There is no office. So it's interesting that by not having that office environment or that office interview where somebody flies somewhere, spends 8 hours kind of being dragged from office to office, anybody who happens to be on hand, and available to interview them, pulled into the room, those experiences were usually significantly negative for candidates. Well, it's just not possible to do that anymore, right? So the slate of decision makers has shrunk. That's a positive thing. And the time to decision has also shrunk during this period of time. Those are both positive things.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of your, and I want to get into this because again, we keep hearing this word neuroscience, pop up. Yeah. And that's sort of the basis of where you are. And, I was sharing with you earlier, a conversation I had just in the beginning of the week with somebody was talking about the neuroscience behind an assessment they were using. And just because, I respect people who have PhDs in neuroscience and multiple degrees, and sometimes, they be an MD, PhD, and they're brilliant people. But, sometimes, they've got their biases in there as well. So let's talk about how do you bring neuroscience? How do you bring science to the hiring process? Because it's beyond just data. I mean,
that's correct.
It's way beyond that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, some people would argue that it is all data, without a doubt, right? Because every piece of information, whether you're experiencing it as a particular number or not, is still data. But I can tell you exactly, what it is. I mean, there are three kind of core elements to HireBrain that we discovered were all significantly helpful to hiring managers and the overall success of hiring. So it was the science of number one is the science of decision making. So and in each of these areas, we have collaborators and people who have informed this work who are preeminent worldwide experts in these areas. The science of decision making and how to make a rational decision, how our brains work. For instance, our brains are wired to make as many automatic decisions as possible and as few strategic decisions as possible. So strategic decisions are often described as cognitive or conscious decisions, right? And automatic decisions as unconscious decisions. Now, I've read this now dozens of times about how biases are mental mistakes. Well, they're not mental mistakes. They may be wrong and they may be morally reprehensible. However, it's not a mental mistake. That's how our brains are wired. And the truth is that we discovered is you can discover what your own biases are and be aware of the ones that are negative and the ones that are positive. Well, how can I have a positive, bias? Well, the more experience you have, right, the more decisions that you make on a regular basis without thinking about them. Some of those lead to success and productivity. Some of those do not. Whether I can have a beer with somebody is not a productive, right? That doesn't lead to a productive decision. Your point earlier about whether, I hired somebody who graduated from blank university, Schenectady. They were fantastic. So I'm just going to hire people from that. That is a negative. That would be a decision, if you will, an unconscious decision that doesn't lead to a productive outcome. The second one is probability science, right? And that's wrapped in both data as well as behavioral economics. So what leads to the highest that's the goal in a hire, right? I mean, what are you doing in a hire? I mean, ultimately, right, you're mitigating risk, right? And you have a hope, if you will, right? You want the highest probability for success. The third element is social sciences, how to create an interview process and how to interview people to get actionable data, the type of data that will lead to a predictable decision. And then we wrapped all of that up in the science of adult learning, right? I mean, the goal here is that, we're a little bit different in that we both teach and train people how to make great hiring decisions. And then we built a tool for them to use before, during, and after the process. And the third element that we discovered is key in adoption of new methodology is a support mechanism, right? So typically people go to a class, maybe they got some great information, right? But that immediately when they leave the course, when they leave that room, if they leave the virtual environment, they start forgetting all of those various different things, right? And those people aren't available typically after that. Like, how do I actually apply this thing? And that was where we step in. We're with learners all along the way, right? So that they can figure out how to adopt that methodology. And that's what's led to literally, ridiculous results, both in the learning and adoption of the methodology, as well as in people's hiring results.
So are you training people to hire differently, or is there a technology that's involved with this?
Yeah, so both. I mean, number one is that what we have discovered, and by the way, this is over thousands, of hires over, multiple years of time. So, you were talking about, earlier about scientists and brilliant people who know things and it's science-based and so on. Well, my world is what's the practical application, of that particular thing, right? And if you haven't proved it in an actual workplace environment, then as far as I'm concerned, it's philosophy. It's just a theory. We have a theory that if you do X, it will lead to Y. Well, I've been putting those things to the test in real world environments to test and see whether, in fact, those things, were true or not. So at the core of it and the core of probability here is that it's a different way of thinking, right? A job description is a rearward facing view of a job. It's a laundry list of everything we think that we want to see in a candidate, right? What we have discovered is, and what we advocate, what we show people how to do every day, is take a forward-facing view of a job, creating a plan for a role. What is the objective that we're trying to reach by hiring? What business problems are we trying to solve, right? What new opportunities or new things are we trying to create by hiring? And actually put that on a plan, put it on a calendar, a 30, 60, 90-day plan, a 6-month plan, 9 to 12 months, and then even beyond 12 months, right? 12 plus months, by simply writing down what it is that you want to accomplish, what's your primary objective in hiring, and then putting that with deliverables on a plan. That work alone leads to a significant increase in success at the 12-month mark, 18-month mark, 24-month mark, and beyond. It is a fundamental different way of looking at a job.
The more you talk, the more it's like, one of the more things that pop into my head. One of the questions I ask is, say, what's your favorite question? And to get engaged with the client when they call me up and they say, hey, do you have a test for this? Or how can you evaluate that? Or can you help me with interview questions? And the first thing I ask is, tell me, if you're sitting across from that new hire 1 year from now, what is it that they were supposed to have accomplished?
Brilliant. Perfect. Yep.
And they don't know.
Right. That is exactly
and they don't
right.
know. And they said, one is, I'd be happy if they're still here.
Yeah, they don't know. They don't know. And that's why, we created this engine. It wasn't enough to have a training course, and it wasn't enough to have software for them to use, and it wasn't enough to just have support. It's that it is all three of those elements combined that lead to those better results. And we can handhold somebody into, we have a very specific process, right? Like to your question, what does that look like? We help them to articulate what it is that they do, and how those objectives are aligned to overall corporate objectives. And we step through this process, and then they get it. What's interesting is people in general, and by in general I mean the vast majority of people and organizations around the world, they approach hiring differently than any other business process at work. You wouldn't build software the way that you hire. You wouldn't build a hospital the way that you hire. You wouldn't do any of the things that you do, at work the way that you hire. So why do you hire that way, right? Well, I don't know. That seems like the only way. I don't know. That's how such and so did it. Fascinating.
Yeah.
So again, going back to this, and I had maybe the wrong perception is so basically you have a methodology. You're going through that. You collect all this data. Is there technology involved in predicting the likelihood? If I tell you exactly what my parameters are, how I'm going to measure success in 30 days, 90 days, 180, and 365, I've got all that lined up. I'm able to identify the skills that are available. And so you'll take me through the process. What's next? I mean, how do you verify that it's accurate? What's your what do you guys do?
It's the interview, isn't it? It's the interview. How do we get the data that we need about a person, right, in order to make a decision about them? Well, here's the thing that I truly believe. Will someday the robots make decisions about who we hire and who we don't hire? Maybe at some places they will, right? Will AI make the hiring decision? Pull the hiring manager out of the equation? Well, I believe that at the end of the day, a hiring manager, by and large, they're going to choose their employees. And here's the thing that people don't talk about enough in this conversation. The employee right, the candidate, they also are going to make a decision on whether or not they want to work for that company. Well, what test is going to convince an employee or a candidate to take a job somewhere, right? Well, they're not, So we do have an interview methodology. It is, at its core, it is behavioral interviewing, right? But how we teach and advocate people to interview in a behavioral, with a core of, behavioral science, right? Behavioral interviewing. The way that they do that is paramount to getting great information. So here's for instance, I'll give you an example, that people, if they trust you, they're more truthful with you. They're more truthful and they're more accurate, right? Mm-hmm. So one thing that we discovered was that both, and this is not both of you guys, I'm sure you'll immediately say, oh yeah, no kidding, we knew that, right? So, we discovered that candidates lie.
No.
Fascinating, right? we also discovered that hiring managers lie.
Yep.
What?
Well, neither one of that's not. I know, right? Right. But you know what? We discovered that both parties, in some cases, a majority of the time, right? Upwards of 80, 90% of the things that they say that are untruthful it's unintentional. People unintentionally lie. And why do they do that? Because an interview is a social construct. And in a social construct, people have various different points of view or behaviors, right? Some people are people pleasers, okay? A lot of people are, especially candidates. They're watching the hiring manager, and they're trying to tell the hiring manager what that hiring manager wants to hear. They will report after the interview. They will have told a story. It's completely bogus. They are aware that it's bogus, right? But they can't help themselves. And they will say afterwards, I don't know why I told them that story. I mean, I just don't well, now we know. We know because in that social environment, right? So we advocate an environment. I know we're getting close to time here, and I tend to be long-winded, as you guys could tell. I mean, it's just not just a passion.
But it's a great conversation. We said we knew this go fast. So hey, before we do run out of time, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm my. Feel free to send me an email. Our website is HireBrain. It's HireBrain.com. HireBrain.com. You can reach me through there. You can send me an email. I'm at David.Nason. That's N as in November, ASON, at HireBrain.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, David Nason. I've been at Oracle, Cisco, Infor, HireBrain, so that's probably enough to find me on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. I am the David Nason at Twitter.
Yeah. Super, David. Nice. We definitely need to get you back. I mean, this is fascinating, and there's a lot that we've actually had a really, really active chat, and I apologize to all you guys that were asking questions. Just kind of a heads up for anybody who wants to continue the conversation, connect with me on LinkedIn or with Keith. We'll continue going there. Or if you have something specific, go to geeksgeezers.googleization.com and just in the contact form, it's real quick. Just throw your question in there, and I definitely get back to you. Because we had some good questions about what we think a lot about, people are going to go back to work and if they had sick days and policies, and not necessarily related to the hiring per se. And then Alvin had a question about theory, and I think you might agree with this, David. It sounds like a lot of your work was based on like the work of Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman, was it look?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Kahneman University. Yep. Absolutely.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So for anybody who's interested, I'd look up Daniel Kahneman as well. And he's got some, you can either buy one of his books or read some of the summaries of it, and you'll get the gist of it. And that's sort of the answers. This is way, way beyond theory. There's definitely science here. But we appreciate your time, David. I appreciate you being here, and we definitely need to get you back. We're going to be you and I are going to be continuing this conversation. So, hey, thanks. Especially when you talked about trust, which, by the way, we have a new trust profile, which looks at transparency and some of these different factors. We're offering it for free right now. So if anybody's listening, you can go, not anybody, whoever is listening, go to bit.ly, it's bit.ly/trust profile, one word. You can go up and take it. It is free. and for a couple of weeks yet. While we're still kind of collecting some data and introducing it. So you can try that and see if people would trust you. And that'll be important, especially if you're a hiring manager or a recruiter. Keith, we're going to wrap it up pretty quick here. Any final words, like 10 seconds?
No, I mean, best of luck to you, David. The software is exactly what the marketplace needs, what recruiters need, what candidates need. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, likewise.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
So thanks again to all our listeners, Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, and also those part of Googlization Nation. Don't forget to join GooglizationNation.com. It is free, and you'll get updates about this. And we've got a couple webinars coming up next. Actually, our first webinar is coming up next week, and doing some more live streams. So you'll get notices about that. Remember, my book's still available at join.googlizationnation.com. That's free. Thank you again to Zor.ai and Success Performance Solution for allowing us to be on the air and sponsoring the show. We appreciate it. Hopefully you guys will go up and look at them and see how they can help. And until next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, W4CY.com. Or you can listen to any of our replays on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, iHeart. I'm sure I missed a couple there.
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. Any of the popular podcasts. So until next week, this is Ira Wolf and Keith Capagna. Don't let the shift hit your plans.